So this is all good information to have. We have at this point kind of a complete sense of what the production cost structure is for this plant or this factory, whatever it is it's producing. We know what its fixed costs are. We know what its variable costs are. We were able to use that information to calculate average costs and total. We were able to use that information to calculate total costs, as well as average and marginal costs. How does that inform what level of production would be optimal? So remember, we started out today talking about profit maximization. So we're not just trying to minimize costs here. And profits are equal to revenues minus costs. So minimizing cost is certainly helpful, I would say, in maximizing profits. If your costs go down and your revenues stay the same, your profits increase. But we also have to think about revenues, right? And remember, revenues are a function or a product, or really the product of how many goods or units you produce times the price at which you can sell them. And that's really the number of goods that you produce is what we're trying to find. That's what we're trying to optimize. So what that equation implies is that the optimal level of production might depend on price. We have to think about how price factors into this. So let's say we're still dealing with the same example plant. We know what the average cost curve looks like. That's shown here in blue. We know what its marginal cost curve looks like. That's shown here in red. And we also, in this case, know what the price is. Let's say there's a whatever it is we're selling. The market price for that is 60 cents per unit. So we can draw that on this figure as well and represent the price here as a horizontal line shown here in yellow, right at 60 cents per unit. So now we're actually in a position to calculate revenues and profits. So the columns that went away here for now are the average cost and the marginal cost. But we keep the units of production, we keep fixed cost and variable cost and total cost in the second through fourth column here. And what we want to do now is fill in these other columns, so revenues and profits. So revenues, remember, are just the number of units that you're producing times the price at which you're producing. So we can fill in that information. Every row is associated with a different number of units that we're producing, and we can get 60 cents. Remember, the market price is 60 cents per unit. So if we produce 1,000 units, we get 60 cents for each one of those. Our revenues would be $600. If we produce 2,000 units, we get 60 cents for every one of those. Our revenues would be 60 cents times 2,000, which is 1,200. If we produce 3,000, we get 60 cents for each one of those. So that's 3,000 times 60 cents, which is $1,800. And so we can go down and fill in this whole column of revenues by multiplying the units of production times the market price of 60 cents. Now, profits, remember, is revenues minus costs. So for every row here, we can take revenues minus total costs and get profits. And what you'll see is that in row 1, our profits are negative because our revenues are 0 and our total costs, which are our fixed costs, are 1,000. So our profits are 0 minus 1,000 equals negative 1,000. In row 2, our profits are also negative. We're selling something, but we're only selling 1,000 units, and we get 60 cents per unit. So our revenues are $600. Our costs are $1,500. So our profits here are minus 900. In row 3, revenues minus cost gives us minus 650. And in row 4, revenues minus cost gives us negative 300. So while we're producing from 0 to 3,000 units, we are not earning a profit. We're taking a loss. Once you get to 4,000 units of production and above, we actually start to make a profit. That's what's shown in blue here. All these lines where you have a positive value for profits. And what we can see is that our profits are actually maximized by producing as much as possible. So when we produce 10,000 units, we make revenues of 10,000 times 60 cents or 6,000. Our total costs are 4,910, leaving us a profit of $1,090. So that is the most profits we can make, given the fact that we can produce between 0 and 10,000 units. So I also want to note where that horizontal price line is located in relation to two things, right? The average cost curve and the marginal cost curve. And one thing that we notice right away is that the price intersects the average cost curve, right? So there are certain parts of the average cost curve where the average cost is above the actual market price. And there are certain parts of the average cost curve that are below the market price. For the marginal cost curve, what we see is that no matter what the level of production at this plant, the marginal cost curve right now is always below the actual price, the market price. And so that's an important thing to remember. So what this implies is that when the marginal cost is less than the price, remember, if you go back and look at the figure, at every point, every level of production, the marginal cost was less than or below the market price. When that is the case, the rule is that profits are maximized when a firm produces as much as possible. In this case, as much as possible meant 10,000 units. So what if the price changes? So last time we talked about the price being 60 cents per unit. Let's say that the market price drops to 50 cents per unit. And again, I want to call your attention to where the price line is, in relation to the average cost curve and the marginal cost curve. So again, the average cost curve is intersected by the market price. There are some parts of the average cost curve that are above the market price, some that are below. And this time we also see that the marginal cost curve intersects the price at some point. There's some point of some level of production on the x-axis, some number of units produced, that where we would be producing a number of units where the marginal cost of production is equal to the price, to the market price. So let's redo this figure. I mean, this graph. We don't have to redo the first four columns, but we do have to redo revenues and profits. And that's because our price has changed. Instead of 60 cents per unit, now we get 50 cents per unit. So revenues at every line are just equal to the number of units of production times 50 cents. So 0 for the first line. For the second line, we get 50 cents for every unit we produce 1,000, so we get $500, and so forth and so on. Profits, again, are revenues minus total costs. Again, at certain levels of production, we are taking a loss. We have negative profits. All the way from 0 units of production through 6,000. But at 7,000, we start to make a profit. And what you can see is that profits are actually maximized when we're producing between 8 and 9,000 units. If we maximize production and produce as much as we possibly can, our profits actually go down a little bit. So the optimal choice in this case is not to produce 10,000 or as much as we can. We want to produce somewhere between 8 and 9,000 units where our profits are maximized at $140. So if the price intersects the marginal cost curve, the rule of thumb here is to try to produce some volume of goods that results in where the marginal cost of production equaling the price. So we can find that on this figure here. So again, we're assuming that the market price is 50 cents per unit, and then we can find exactly where the price intersects the marginal cost curve, and that point on the x-axis indicates the number of units that we should produce in order to maximize profits. So this would be the optimal number of units to produce. So we have a couple of different rules here that we want to follow, some heuristics that would allow us to make optimal production decisions. So if we are making things and producing things at a level where our marginal cost is greater than the price, that means that we're making at least one thing and selling it for less than it costs to make. If we're producing when marginal cost at some level where the marginal cost is less than the price, that means that we could produce more and increase profits. So this is the general rule of thumb: produce at the level where marginal costs equal the price. This is our sort of key to maximizing profits. However, it's a reasonable question to ask, following this rule, guarantee profits? And the answer is no. And so to figure that out, let's decrease the price one more time and see. So let's say at first we had the market price of 60 cents per unit, then it dropped down to 50 cents per unit, and now it drops even lower. The market price is now 45 cents per unit. And so that yellow line has dropped twice, and now we're sitting right at 45 cents per unit. And again, the price is intersecting the marginal cost curve, but what you will see is that the price is now under the average cost curve for every level of production. And so what that translates to are negative profits at every level of production. There is no level of production where the average cost of producing a unit is going to be less than the price we can get for it, which means that we will always be producing something and selling it and not making enough money to actually pay for it. And this happens because the average cost curve is above the price at every single level of production, which means that there's never an opportunity for us to make a profit on a single unit. No matter what level of production we're producing at, we're never able to sell it at a high enough price to actually make our money back, to pay for the actual cost of producing it. But our optimization rule, that we want to produce at the level where marginal cost equals price, still holds in a sense. It minimizes losses. So let's go back and take a look at the results here. So clearly we're losing money at every level of production. So we have negative profits, but we do minimize losses. Our negative profits are the smallest possible loss we can get by producing at about 8,000. So that would be our optimal level of production in this case, is the level of production that minimizes losses. So that brings up another potentially interesting question, which is, why would a firm or a company ever sell something at a loss? And there are lots of reasons here. The firm might be trying to increase market share or outcompete its rivals. It might think that price is going to increase shortly at some time in the future, and also it might have reduced flexibility in changing its output. So if there are certain constraints that make it difficult for a factory to change its level of production, it might be willing to produce too much or too little in the short term and take a loss if it expects that the market or prices will change in the near future. Okay, that's it for today. Next time, we're going to talk about supply, demand, and prices. Please note that reading number 3 is up, and you should read that for next time. All right, thanks.